code, make sure you're on module 9. Nobody's on module 7, nobody's on module 8, we're all on module 9. Okay, make sure you're moving forward, make sure you have a folder for every week. Okay, I am going to pop open my parts header. And on my parts header right now, I have a couple of anchors right here. And some of you may have put something into your code that would have put an active onto each of these so that it can show which page you're on. Now at the moment, I can't really, mine doesn't do that. And so I might need to do something else. There's a number of possibilities of how this can work, but let's just explore one possibility, one very simplistic possibility, okay? And the way we can do that is what we can do is write in a tiny script. And I can spell it right here to do something. So on this page, we can write in one script. You might be thinking to yourself, shouldn't we put this in our JavaScript? Possibly. But this is something that's going to be right in our header. It's going to be only associated with the header, so it's like header code. It's going to be one simple, small thing, and so we're just going to kind of do it this way, okay? What we're going to do is we are going to console.log something called the window.location whenever this header is run. So I'm going to save right now, and I'm going to open up my one. I want to remind everybody that as we're looking through the code, if you go back to our 608 folder, you can see the code view of this week and any of the files that we work on. But right now, I want to come back over here. So in module 9, I've got a demo. I've also got a product list.php. So I've got a product list.php. I'm just going to really quick make a couple of other pages, just really quick, okay? I'm going to come back in here and I am going to say product site, and I'm going to say paragraph. This is a cool website, buy things. This is my main, so I'm going to save this as product main.php. And then I'm going to say cart, just for right now. These are your items. Save as product cart.php. And with that amount of stuff, I can at least make, oh, I need an about. So we'll make one more. I'll say about the team. And I'll say, I made this. And I'll say product about.php. So I just got a couple of my pages. You guys should have already done all this. This is what you were doing last week, but I just needed a couple really quick. So right over here, I'm going to do product about.php, and I'm going to do product cart.php, and I'm going to save, and I am going to refresh. And now when I go to about, I've got like about, and I've got a cart, and I've got a shop. And then up here for this one right here, I'm going to make this be an anchor. This is going to go back to product main.php, and I spelled it wrong. Anchor, save, refresh, cool, product site, cool, shop. Okay, so I just needed to quick have a web page, right? This is something that you guys should have done last week, is you should have made sure your whole website worked. You should have checked all your links, made sure all your links worked, and all that kind of stuff. So back in our header, when we load this page, over in our console, it should show something called the location. And if you open up this location right now, it's got a whole bunch of information about the page that's being viewed, or I should say the URL of the page that's being viewed. So the window.location is all about the URL that we're viewing right now. So it's got stuff like the host and the origin and like the protocol that's being used, whether it's HTTPS or whether it's HTTP all kinds of other fun things are inside of this. And what it does have is a path name. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to say that I want to let let f equal window.location dot, what's it called? Path name dot split, and we're going to split this on a slash. Okay? So we're going to take the window.location.pathname and we're going to split it on a slash. If you want to go look up on the internet, look up JavaScript split to find out more information about what that does. But it takes a string, it splits it on a character or on a word, and then it gives you back an array. So now I should have an array of all the folders and then the final file name of where I am. Okay? So then, at that point, what I have is a split right here. Okay? Now, what I'm then going to do is I'm going to slice that split and get -1. Now, this is a tricky thing that I'm doing right here. I'm going to slice the array that just got returned, and I'm going to do -1, which is going to take the array. It's going to give me back a slice of that array, starting at -1, moving forward to the end. It should give me the last item from the array. This is a tricky thing. If you want to look up JavaScript array slice, you'll find out more about slice and some of the things that you can do with it. And then at that point, I have an array of one item that should be the last item of the split of the path name. I'm going to select the first item from that, which now should make f equal the file name of the file that I currently am looking at. That's what that should be. So all of that got me the file name. So it should be something like productlist.php. That's what I should be looking at. Okay? Now, at that point, I'm going to go to the document and I'm going to query selector all. Why? Because I can. It's fun. I'm going to query selector all for my navbar, because I have one. If you don't have a navbar, don't do this. For my navbar nav li. Okay? And I'm going to go back to each one of my navbars, and I'm going to go back to each one of my LIs, and I'm going to give them a data ID. Now, in JavaScript, we've learned about data attributes, and how data attributes are a way of you adding sort of just some data to this thing. And what we're going to do is we're going to call this product underscore, and I'm going to say list.php, and I'm going to say about.php, and I'm going to say cart.php. For right now, I'm going to make a really simple version of this, just a super simple version of this. I got a data ID right there, okay? So I'm now looping through my LI. What I've got is a query selector all of all of my LIs, and I've put a data ID onto each one of my LIs, okay? What I'm going to do is for each through each one of my LIs, and I'm going to run a function. That function is going to be an arrow function that we've talked about before, and this arrow function is going to get passed in an O, and O means the current object in this case, okay? So what this is going to do is it's going to select all of the navbar nav LIs on my page, which should be only one set, okay? I should only have one navbar on my page. I should only have one nav inside of that thing, and if I don't, that's fine too, I guess. But then I'm going to look through all of the LIs inside of the navbar nav LI, and then I'm going to loop through them. And the current one will be called O. Okay? At that point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to check to see if O, which is the current LI. Actually, let's just call it LI. That'll be easier. We'll call it LI. li dot if li dot data set dot id equals f, then I want to set the li dot class list dot add active. Okay, now, as a side note, I'm writing this without jQuery for no better reason than sometimes it's fun to do that. Okay, I'm doing query selector all, which is just pure JavaScript. I'm doing dataset.id, which is like the jQuery data method, and I'm doing class list add, which is like add class in the jQuery library. So I'm doing a bunch of things that jQuery can also do. It's just that this particular version of it is relatively small, and I'm not going to bring jQuery into it right now. Okay? It's the only reason I'm doing it this way. I'm saying if the data set of the element has an ID that equals the f, which should be the file name of the current file we're on. So if the file name that we're on matches the data ID of the li, then we're going to add a class of active to the class list of that li. It should be that if I refresh right now, my shop now has an active on it. And if I click to about now has an active on it. Cart now has an active on it. And if I go back to the main page, not on any of those pages. So nothing happens. And if I inspect it, you can see that it has been given a class of active, and there it is. Now it's also worth mentioning that I think my nav is currently going responsive, but I didn't bring in all of my responsiveness. So I'm going to go back to one of my previous examples and make sure I'm bringing back in responsiveness into my nav, because I wasn't currently. So now, there we go. Now my responsiveness is back. Ah, there we go. My responsive thingus wasn't there, but now it is. Yay. Okay, cool. So that is a way that we could add active to our page, which is basically to check the current page we're on, check an element in the nav, and then if the page we're on matches one of our nav items, then we can add an active onto that element, which is basically, before you might have just been hard coding an active onto each page, and now we can just sort of add an active onto that page if we're there. Now, you might notice that this doesn't handle what would happen if, for instance, we were on a product item. You could get a little bit more complicated on this to see if you wanted to have like multiple possibilities or something like that. But for right now, what this is doing is it's just checking the page. It's checking to see if that's a data ID on one of the elements, and if it is, then it adds an active onto it. And that's a possibility for solving that. Some of you might be thinking to yourself, is there any way we can do this without JavaScript? And the answer is sure, possibly. But this is a fun way of doing it. It's fun to learn a little bit of programming all over the place. So that's what we're learning right now. And it turns out the PHP way of doing this is way more complicated. If you think that JavaScript is complicated, it's not. It's pretty simple. It's pretty small in terms of JavaScript. The PHP way would be much more complicated. We'd have to build the list out of, it would be annoying. So, one small possibility about how to do that. Does anyone else have any questions about what they did this last week? Okay, good. Hey guys, welcome to day 2 of PHP. Today, we're going to be talking about a fun subject. And the subject is, unfortunately, something that doesn't have a direct bearing on our final. I need to describe to you what we're going to learn today, okay? Today, we are going to learn something that does not directly relate to our final. We're going to learn it because it's important to learn other things than just what's directly related to our final, okay? Today, we're going to learn how to read a JSON file of data and make a web page based on a data source. But in our final, we're going to be using MySQL as a data source. And today what we're going to learn how to do is read a much simpler data source. A data source you can write just on your own if you wanted to. If you wanted to test something out in PHP or JavaScript or something like that, you could write a JSON file. JSON files, however, are not a database. They are a data format, which means that we're going to learn how to write a pure data file. What is data? She loves this. She's like, I hate this chair. What is data? Does anyone know? Raise your hand and tell me what data is. This is not a trick question. Tell me what you think data is. Wrong. Too specific. What is data? Not specific enough. What is data? Input and numbers are data, but that's not what is data. So, you guys, data is not presentation. So, it's not how you show something to the user. It's not logic. So, it's not programming like if statements and loops and stuff like that. Data is, well, what is data? Data is all the other stuff. So it's not presentation, so it's not like colors. Although, I guess it's not, data isn't, data are the values associated with the presentation of something to the user or the programming of something that shows something to the user, okay? Data is pure. It's not logic. It's not shown. It's just data. The number 5 is data, okay? If we show the number 5 to the user, that is a presentation of that data, okay? So for instance, your name is something. It can be written and shown to somebody, but that doesn't mean that presents how to say it or anything like that, right? It's not the content that's shown. It's the content that creates what's shown. It is the value. Data is value. Okay? You have $5 in your bank account, and the bank account app shows you that you have $5. That visual of $5 is not the value 5. Okay? And that's the difference. Okay? So data is not programming, and data is not a visual. Data is just the value. Okay? So what we're going to do today is we're going to learn a little bit about what's called JSON. So what I want us all to do right now is we're going to make a new folder. And inside of that new folder, which is going to be called data, I just put that in the wrong spot. New folder data. There we go. We're going to make a file called jsonnotes.json. Now, I'm pronouncing it that way on purpose. This is not the name JSON. This is JSON, which stands for JavaScript Object Notation. If you're writing notes, JavaScript Object Notation is what JSON stands for. And I very specifically pronounce it that way simply because some people pronounce it Jason, and then you write the name Jason, and that's not what this is. Okay? JSON. Okay. Whoops. Okay. What you need to know about JSON it is a way of writing data that JavaScript did for the longest time, and then somebody took that and turned it into something that people could use outside of JavaScript. That's why it's called JSON, because it's JavaScript Object Notation. It's the way you write data in JavaScript. What you need to know is that JavaScript JSON files always start with either an array or an object. Now, someone raise your hand and tell me what these two symbols are called. Someone raise your hand and tell me what these two symbols are called. These two. Raise your hand. Tell me what those two symbols are called. Raise your hand right now. Someone. Dear God, someone. Raise your hand and tell me what those two symbols are called. Please. Jesus Christ. Little sweet baby Jesus, please. Someone. Anyone. Do not use your hands to describe these two symbols. It's called the brackets. Everybody, I want you all to feel super bad about yourself and then write that down as a note, because you all need to feel super bad about yourself and write that down as a note. We're going to call those brackets, okay? Sometimes we can call them square brackets if we want to get really specific, okay? So those are called brackets. If you didn't know that, or you didn't want to answer, write that down as a note, okay? What are these two symbols called? We're going to ask for hands raised in the next couple things. What was your answer? Braces, okay? These are called the braces. Sometimes they are called the curly braces, or if you're not into different names, sometimes they're called the curly brackets. But we don't like to do that because that's confusing, okay? We're going to call the square brackets brackets. We're going to call the curly braces braces, okay? Someone raise your hand and tell me what these two symbols are called. Yes? Parenthesis. Everybody repeat after me. Everybody repeat after me. Parenthesis.
Parenthesis.
Parentheses.
Parenthesis.
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 Parentheses.
Parenthesis.
Parenthesis. Parentheses. Do it out loud. Parentheses. Parenthesis. You guys, this is important. This is not a joke. I know it sounds funny, but this is important. You're going to go into a job, and you're going to have to say something. And if you come out of my class doing this to describe these, you make me look bad. So stop it, okay? You need to learn. I know that that word is hard for people of other cultures and for people with lisps, okay? But you need to learn how to say those words. However, luckily for you, some people reduce this down to just parens. Okay? So you can reduce that down to just parens. So around the left paren or the right paren or something like that. Okay? Now, some horrible people call these the round brackets. Just awful people who should be ignored. If you feel like you can't remember a name and you want to appropriately not do this, you could say the round brackets. It's weird, but you could do it. Okay? How about these two symbols? What are these two called? Raise your hand. Yes? We're going to say angle, not angel. As she looked at her screen. Wait, what did I say? We're going to call these angle brackets. Okay? Unfortunately, that's another bracket name. So we could call these angle brackets. What's another name for these? Anyone raise your hand? What's another name for these? Anyone in the middle row? Anyone in the middle row? What's another name for these? Come on. Did none of you know math? What is a math name for these? Don't you look away from me when I'm looking at you. Come on, what's a math name for these? They're used in math. Less than or greater than? That's an easy one, okay? Sometimes these are also called the carets because they look like carrots. That's not a joke, that's true. Sometimes these are called the carets, okay? So what we have here We have brackets, braces, parens, and carets that we can call all of these. It doesn't matter what you call them because technically all of them can be called brackets, okay? But here's the thing. All of you need to be able to refer to these symbols. Each and every one of you. There is none of you that should be going after this class, oh, I don't know what they're called, okay? And so, when you take the 617 class, and I do this exact same day, you had better be able to refer to any one of these symbols. All of you should yell out, parentheses! Okay? And if that word, parenthesis, is hard for you to say, then you need to practice saying that word as any other word you might learn in a new language is. Okay? So, you guys need to know the names for any of these symbols. And at that point, you need to know that a JSON file always starts with one of either an array or an object. So we're going to start with an object. Okay? And we're going to make some notes in this object. And we're going to make this notes property have a value of an array. And we're going to write our first note. JSON files start with either an object or an array. And you guys, I am word wrapping right now, but you'll notice on my line numbers I did not make a new line. Don't you make a new line. Okay? Just word wrapping. JSON files start with either an object or an array. JSON files cannot have comments. So write any comments in this array. If any of you right now, in this file that we're writing right now called JSON notes, have something that looks like this, it's not allowed. So don't do any comments in this file. Comments are not allowed in this file. It will break the file. If I come to any of your computers later, and your JSON isn't working because you have a comment in your file, I'll be so mad. No comments. Commas go between items in an array or object. But there should never be a trailing comma. Some of you might notice that right now, I have a comma at the end of the first two lines, but not the last one. There should never be a trailing comma in an array or object. It will break your JSON file. That is a trailing comma. A comma at the end. However, when we have a new one, we can add a comma. All property names must be inside quotation marks. So for instance, notes is a property of our main object. And its name is in quotation marks. You guys might know that if you've ever written JSON in JavaScript and you've written an object, the property names don't need strings. That's because JavaScript JSON and JSON file JSON are slightly different. They have slightly different rules. JSON files are more strict about their rules than JavaScript JSON is. Okay? All string quotation marks must be double quotes in a JSON file. All string quotation marks must be double quotes in a JSON file. So for instance, right now, if I change these two quotation marks right here to single quotes, I get a great big okay? In fact, if I remove them, I also get a great big Has to be double quotation marks, okay? So, guys, JSON files have some strict rules, but not that many. You can remember these. What's cool about JSON files is you can write a database, like a whole goddamn database, if you just know how to write it. Now, the only thing is that this file is, in its current state, not editable. We're going to have an assignment tonight that might be editable, but probably won't. We'll see. Okay? But in essence, if you wanted to make a website, you could actually make a website by just writing some JSON. For instance, I don't know if you guys have ever gone to a website called hamiltondraws.com. You might have been there. This website right here has a thing called blogfeed.json, I think. This is my website. It's just a great big JSON file that I've been working on for 20 years. It started out as a basic JSON file, and then I eventually created an editor for it. But it started out as a JSON file. It is still a JSON file. My website is run off of just a JSON file. And that means that if you just learned how to make JSON, you could make complex database-driven websites really fast. Without complex databases, you could write complex data and make a website based off of that. It is possible to do. After today, you could make, technically, any kind of website you might want to make, if you can especially remember these rules. So, we're going to comma right here, and we're going to make a new property of our main object, and we're going to call it users. And it's going to be an array. Now, in this users array, we're going to make a new object. Because JSON is able to have objects inside of arrays, inside of arrays, inside of objects, inside of objects, inside of arrays. Okay? You can go all the way down. Now at that point, we're going to make a property called name. I want you to put your name. At that point, we're going to make another property called type. I'm going to put teacher. Perhaps you should put student. Note, you should probably make your property names be lowercase, because that is programming data, whereas this is presentational data. Okay? Programming data should almost always be lowercase and no spaces. Okay? And in this case, property names are programming data, as opposed to presentational data. We're going to present the word, the name Hamilton Klein. We're not going to present the property name. That's programming data. Do an email. And then let's do a classes, and let's make this an array of numbers. Do your classes that you're taking right now. You're not supposed to be writing my data, you're supposed to be writing your data. If you're writing my data, you're doing it wrong. You're supposed to be writing your data. In fact, what I want you to do now is I want you to duplicate this a couple times, lean over to the person next to you, and get the data from someone next to you. Just be rude about it. Just lean over and ask the person what their data is, and I want you to fill out a couple of users into your user database, okay? Right now, everybody, lean over to the don't write my data, lean over to the person next to you and make a couple of more users in your database.
Where we get the data? It's your own data. It's your own data. classes。哦，就现在有哪些 class？还有是。然后要 copy 几个码。这个间括号完了不需要逗号啊？为什么？下一行没东西。啊？下一行没东西。下一行没有东西就不需要。那为什么最后一个这个是需要的呢？第三行的那个 note。因为这个它同时，这个 bracket 里面有2个，所以这中间也要1个。
对。
就抄这个大括弧圆括弧里面，对吧？要改名字哈。
In case you can't figure it out, I just want you to like meet some people. Just get a couple. You only need a couple in there. Yes. Yeah? Did it work out? Awesome. Did you actually group? I rarely ever group. I just use it to organize.
你没有上608吗？
I mean, it works.
我们这堂课就是608呀，所以我刚才没买。
我直接看你的他了。
I like watching it scramble. All right. Hey, everybody. You got a couple people in your database? Hopefully you have a couple of people in your database. Everybody. I need to ask you a question. Does my data look good to you? Does my data look good to you? No? Why not? So, what if this is entries into a room? You could have the exact same data over time. Anybody else? Does my data look good to you? Yes? We got to vote for yes. Anybody else? Does my data look good to you? It's a yes or no. No? Why not?
It's not a good presentation, I think.
It's just data. It doesn't have a presentation.
So it's good.
It's good?
Yeah.
Anybody? Anybody have a problem with this?
It can be confusing.
I mean, the property names are fine, I think.
Like classes.
Well, but that's how we would present it to the user, right? Like in the data doesn't have presentation, okay? Data has no presentation. So if we wanted to present this to a user, it would be presented in a nice way with lots of labeling and all that kind of stuff. But this is just data. Does the data look good?
Yes.
No.
Yes. I don't know if there's this red. Is it okay or there's something wrong with the?
That just means it's a number. Do any of you have a problem with this part? How many of you put a comma there, even though I didn't? Anybody? Boo! We just went over rules, you guys. We just learned these rules. Last time I gave you an hour, and maybe that was mean of me, but this time we just learned those rules like 2 minutes ago. Come on! To be fair, you guys, sometimes it can be difficult to notice these things, especially if you're writing the data. If you're writing the data, it can be difficult to notice these things. And so let's learn about a tool that is very useful to you called a linter. L-I-N-T. A linter. We're going to look up something called a JSON linter. We're going to go to, it doesn't matter which one, we'll go to the first one, jsonlints.com. Okay? I'm going to copy all of my JSON and paste it into this page, and I'm going to say validate JSON, and it's going to give me an error. Now, the problem with most errors is that they only sort of try to tell you what's wrong. They don't actually have a great way of telling you what's wrong. They're like, I was expecting one of these things, either an end of file or a closing brace or a comma or a closing bracket. And what I got was an opening brace. So it's saying like right around here, there was an error. It doesn't know what it is. You might notice that this thing even rewrote our JSON, so it's not even the right line number necessarily. But there's a problem here. As soon as I add in a comma, this thing should validate just fine, okay? But you guys, linters are available for all of your languages that you write in. So for instance, there's a JavaScript linter, there's a PHP linter, there's JSON linters, HTML linters. If you want to look up a PHP linter, you can do it, and they might help you with your PHP code. Here's the thing that you need to know about linters, okay? Linters don't check to see if your language is good. It's simply, they don't check to see if your program works. They just check to see if your language is good. What that means is that if you do, for instance, a JavaScript linter, it doesn't check to see whether your programming will work. It just checks to see if you wrote anything wrong. Like, did you forget a semicolon, or did you forget a closing brace, or something like that, okay? So, a linter can be a very useful tool, and in our case, if we, for some reason, were writing our JSON and we had a problem with it, we might have to go look up what was wrong with it, especially if there was a large amount of data. Yes?
We cannot add it to the subline. I don't know.
There are linters available for Sublime. However, they got super complicated at one point, and I've never been able to figure them out. So I've never bothered with them. If you want to look into the Sublime linter that exists, which has plugins that are all specific linters for each specific language that you might want, you can look into that. I've never been able to figure out, and I find that the JavaScript linters are a little bit too opinionated. They're a little bit like, you have to do this right, and I'm like, fuck you, I do it the way I want. They're like really opinionated about spaces and tabs and all that kind of stuff, and so I don't tend to bother with them. But for you, it might be very useful for you to have a linter like that. But there's also just websites that have it all available. Okay, you guys? I want to tell you something. I want to remind you of something that I started to say earlier, and I just want to say it again. Right now, if you wanted to, you could write a JSON database of data and start making your blog or your journal for your portfolio right now. You could start coding it, programming it tonight if you wanted to, okay? Because in that case, all you need is a data source and then programming that can show that data source, present it to a user. And that's what you're going to have by the end of tonight. You could start making your portfolio with a journal tonight. And in that case, what you would do is if you wanted to add a new journal, you would have to go into the JSON and edit the JSON, and then it would show up on your site. Okay? If you wanted to make a JSON-based portfolio gallery with like data about an image and stuff like that, you could make a JSON database and then start creating a portfolio tonight if you wanted to. This is important. It's important that you understand that. However, it's also important that you understand that what we do today is a sidetrack from what we're doing for the final. Okay? Tonight, what we're going to do is we're going to learn how to deal with a JSON file. But in actuality, for our final, we won't be doing this. Okay? We will be doing something else. So, let's right now learn how to deal with a JSON file. We are going to make a new document, and this new document is going to be saved into our main folder, and it's going to be called learningdata.php. Also, I'm going to delete my old HTML files because I don't really need those anymore.
We can do it too.
What?
Delete all HTML files.
If you still have, I mean, you should have all PHP files. So I'm not deleting my HTML parts, but I am deleting my old HTML demos. Just to clean up this folder a little bit, make it a little bit more presentable. Okay, so we are making a file called learningdata.php. Okay? Learningdata.php. I have a folder called data, and it has a JSON notes. So if you're following along on my stuff, make sure you're following along to the different parts of where we're at. Okay? What we're going to do on this page is we're going to make it an HTML5 page, because that's what PHP pages are. Okay? PHP pages at their core are HTML pages. So we're going to say user admin. Actually, no, I take it back. Let's call this learning data. That's better. There we go. Learning data. Okay. At the top of this file, let's bring in a PHP tag like this. Now, I want you to notice that essentially what I've done is I've made it so that there's no space in between the first line and the start of the doc type of this, which means that what I'm going to do inside of this PHP block is I'm simply going to write code that does not echo. Generally speaking, I'm going to write code that doesn't echo. It just sets up a bunch of variables and stuff like that. This is a good way to do programming, is to instantiate a bunch of variables at the top of your script and then use them somewhere in the middle of your script when they're necessary. Okay? To define things at the top of your script and then use them somewhere else is a good idea. Okay? So inside here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make something called file name. My file name is going to be, well, this is important that you make sure that you point to where your file is. My file is in my data folder, and it's called JSON notes.json. You guys, make sure you point to your actual file. Wherever your file is on your folder, make sure you point to it. Okay? Make sure you're smart. Do smart things. Okay. So I've made a variable called file name. Let's make a variable called file. File is going to be a PHP function called file get contents. Now, file get contents is a PHP function. If you go to php.net and you look up file get contents, you'll find all kinds of information about how this works. It says that file get contents expects to be passed in a string of a file name, and then it says that it will return the read data of the file or false. So it's going to return a string is essentially what it is. It's going to return a string of the file. So we're going to pass in the file name into this file get contents, and it should read that file, and then file should be the text of that content. Okay? If we die file right now, then when it should die with the text of our JSON file, because that is what gets returned by our file get contents. So file get contents is going to read our file into this script as text. Okay? Then what we're going to do is we're going to say data equals JSON decode that file. JSON decode is a PHP function. You can go read up more about it on your own. So we're going to make a data that is the JSON decode of that file. So we're going to try to die data. We're going to save, we're going to refresh, and it's going to fail. And it's because data should now be an object. And I don't know if you guys remember from last week, when we tried to echo an object, it wasn't able to echo appropriately. Do you guys remember that? So let's do this. Let's go back to our learning PHP. All the way at the bottom of our learning PHP, we made a function called printp. Do you guys remember that? Let's make a new folder and a new file on our server. Let's make a new folder called PHP files. And let's make a file in there called, actually, I lied. Let's make a new folder called lib which you might actually already have. If you already have a library file, go in there. And let's make a new folder called PHP in there. And then we're going to make a file called helpers.php. So what I just did was I made a library folder and a PHP folder and then a helpers.php inside of there. Okay? Library folder. If you already have one with JavaScript in it, then that's where you will put your then PHP folder and a helpers.php. Inside here, I'm going to make my print p function. So we're just going to copy it and paste it from the previous day. Okay? Copy and paste it from the previous day. And then we're going to include that and then we're going to die by print p our data. So, we just did a couple of things. Let me just review what we just did. We went back to last week where we had that print p in our learning PHP file. And we copied that into a file called helpers, which we located inside of our library folder, inside of a PHP folder. I spelled include wrong. Include lib php helpers.php. And then hopefully now, if we save and refresh, we should print out our data and then die without doing anything else. So, let me just, okay, so right here, what we've got is we've got a file name of the file we want to open. We go and get the contents of that file as a string, and then we decode that string into JSON as data. These names are irrelevant. They could be named whatever you want. These two functions are actual PHP functions that we're using. And if you need to learn more about them, you can go look them up. At that point, we made our own library of PHP functions called helpers.php. We're going to add to that a lot throughout this semester. Okay? For the rest of the semester, we're going to be adding PHP functions to a helpers where we sort of build up our own library of PHP functions that help us do things. Okay? And it's useful to have all of that in sort of one place. Okay, so we are loading this into our thing. You guys, I want to remind you that if you want to see my code, you can see my code by going to the 608 folder and going to the codeview.php and then browsing to this set of files. Okay? If you need to see my stuff, that's where you can see it. It might also be helpful to then duplicate that tab and then have my actual view open so that you can actually see all of that code running. Okay? Okay? Okay. Let's delete those two things. Or better yet, let's comment them out. Maybe we'll want them again later. You guys, we now have data. And data is something that we can access. We can access our database of data. What that means is we could echo something like data. And data is now our top object in the JSON file. Okay? So what that means is that data has a property called notes. And that notes is an array. And we can select, for instance, the first note. And we could echo that if we wanted to. Okay? So now we have very complex data that we're trying to select. Last week you guys were like, Why would anyone select data like that? Well, because data gets complex sometimes, okay? If we wanted to, we could select the data users. One, name. So this would select the second user's name. All of my users are the same. Okay? Okay, let's comment that out. Let's get into our page. First of all, let's include our head. So parts/head.php. Let's make a header that is a class of navbar, and let's put an let's put a container h1 that says learning data. And then let's put a container, and then inside of that let's put a card. And then inside of that, let's put an H2 that says notes. Is that working? Good? Oh my. Parts head. Did I upload my folder? I think I did, didn't I? Maybe I didn't. Let me upload my folder. Oh, parts head.html. Yeah, on mine. I named mine head.html. There we go. All right, cool. Now I got a new document. Learning data. Notes. Okay, you guys. What we're going to do is we're going to make an unordered list of all of our notes. And we're going to do it by looping through the notes that we have in our database. It is important to understand that if I say that I want a bunch of LIs, what is the looping part of this HTML structure? Is it the UL? The UL does not loop. And so what you guys need to know is what does loop and what does not loop in your HTML structures that are already part of your designs. If you're writing notes right now, what you need to write is find the looping parts. Okay? Some of you last week were asking me questions like, am I supposed to make parts for everything? No, not yet. Just parts that repeat from page to page. Okay? Because now we're going to make parts that repeat within the page. So what is the looping part? In this case, the LI is the looping part. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep this UL right there. And then I'm going to open up a PHP block inside of that UL. Okay? So I've made my UL. Now I've got a PHP block inside of that UL. And then I am going to start what's called a for loop. Now you should have used a for loop in 601. A for loop is a way of looping through data. We're going to make a very simple for loop, and it's going to work like this. We're going to make a variable called I and say at the start of our loop it equals 0. This is called instantiation. At that point, we are going to check to see if that I is less than the count of data notes. Because last week we learned that count was a way of seeing how many items are in an array. And we know that data notes is an array. So we're going to be able to count how many items are in that array. So at the moment, this should be 5. So what this is going to say is this comparison will be while I is less than 5, loop. That's what this is going to say. Okay? At that point, we're going to set our iteration, and we're going to say that we want to increment I at the end of every loop. That is an increment I. So I plus plus, plus plus is the incremental operator. All of this stuff is supposed to be a review. You are already supposed to know this. For right now, this is the same thing as saying I plus equals 1. It's an incrementer. Okay? All right, so for I equals 0. Wow, I is less than the count of data notes, and after every loop, increment I by 1. At this point, we're going to echo. We're going to echo an li. And inside of here, we're going to brace for data, notes, $I. Now last week, we learned that you could use a variable to select an index in an array. And you all were like, that sounds stupid. Why would you ever do that? We're using the variable I, which has a number value as it increments from 0 to the length of data notes. We're using the variable I to select a particular note from the data notes. And at that point, if we save and we refresh, we should see all of our notes. Loops are supposed to be a review, so we're not going to spend too much time on this. For right now, what you need to know is that if you need to look up any of this, you need to look up some of this. If this is confusing to you, you need to do a review course on basic programming concepts like for loops. Okay? Now, I am going to duplicate this card. And I'm now going to say users. I'm going to duplicate the whole card and all the code inside of it. And I'm going to make a new section that's called users. Now, I am going to loop through users the exact same way that I was looping through notes. But at this point, I'm still going to make an li, but then I'm going to show some more information. So I'm going to break this down into multiple lines. Luckily, you guys, double-quoted PHP strings can be broken down into multiple lines. They don't have to be a single line. And here, what we can do is we can, for instance, say that there is a strong element, and that is going to show users I, name, and then we'll show a break, and then we will show users I type, break, and users I email, and we'll save, and we'll refresh. We should now see all of our users loop through and shown. And this is what I was talking about earlier. Okay? What we have now is it's important to note that we have a UL around this PHP block. Okay? The UL is a structured element that then has repeating LIs inside of it. The UL itself does not loop. And this is a very important aspect that all of you have to pay attention to and focus on right now. When you go into your code this week, which is going to be something that you need to start doing, you need to start thinking about what is the looping content of your page. What part of your design loops and what part does not? And you need to find the start and end of the loop of your design, especially your product list page. That's the main part that we're going to focus on, okay? The product list page has a looping part inside of it. You need to find what that is. You need to break that apart into a design, okay? So, the other cool thing about this is that now, if I want to change this thing, I don't have to change this 15 different times. If I want to change this user, I just change the data. Right? Anyone know what Chandler's job is?
No.
Nobody knows. That joke is getting older and older the more I do it. Boom. All I do is change the data and refresh, and my page cycles through different data now. Just like knowing that now you only have to design a part once. Now, if we want to loop through 100 things, I don't have to change it 100 times. I just change the design once and change the data. Now, it's possible you fucked up the data, in which case you might have to change that 100 times, but that's different. Okay? If I want to change the way data is presented to the user in the view, I only have to change one looping template. Okay? Does anyone want to ask me a question right now? Yes?
So for this, we're gonna use this for the single item page.
Great question. Earlier I said that what we are doing today does not directly relate to what we're doing for our final. Right now we're still on a side topic of learning to deal with data in general. Okay, so in general we're learning to design for data, but we're not going to use a JSON file, and we're not quite going to do things in the way we're doing. Right now we're taking it slow. This is slow, by the way. This is us taking it slow. Okay, we're digesting this slowly. So we have designed a page now that has looping concepts through two different kinds of complex data, right? One was a simple array of strings, and one was a more complex array of objects that had properties, that had more data. Okay? So this is not directly related to our final, but it is a similar concept. Okay? Any other questions at the moment? Because you broke it? Hold on. I don't believe you. On line 36. Huh? Sorry. Hey guys. Side question. Do any of you right now, when you print P your data at the top of your script, do any of you see a little 1 right here?
Yes.
Anyone else? If you try to print P your data at the top of your script, do you see a little 1 right there? Anyone else? Top of my script, I just print P data. Do you see a little 1? Try it. Do you see a 1? You got a 1? Anyone got a 1? Did any of you lint your JSON before we went into today? You know, like I showed you to do? No. I showed you to go to jsonlint.com. Did you know me? I said go to jsonlint.com and lint your JSON to see if it works. And if you didn't do that, it's possible your JSON is bad right now. Yes? Hmm? Well, you haven't saved yet. Always white. Here we go. I just closed it and reopened it. For some reason, it had gotten set into something, so you just need to close the file and reopen it for the coloring to come back.
I'm getting some more.
Yeah, you are. Isn't that weird? There should be a file somewhere, yeah. No, file name is a variable for this file. So,
I don't know why they didn't show up.
yeah, that looks weird. All right. Got errors?
No, yeah, but we don't understand like what does it mean.
Well, let's see. It says was seen classes, but got that. Let's see here. You don't have comments.
你的那个，他说这个把这个去掉，看试一下，对吧
Okay.
就这样。
So,
我就没有啊。
by the way, you guys, just to really drive home the point, I want to remind you that different HTML elements can change things. I'll just change this into an OL, and now this will be I got a numbered list. That's fun too. Remember, we're still designing things. You should make sure that they're the appropriate HTML elements and all that kind of stuff. What we're going to do now, you guys, is we're going to take this learningdata.php and we're going to make it a little bit more. So let's make a new file. Actually, let's make a new file and let's call it useradmin.php. Useradmin.php. You guys, an administration page is a page where you can edit your data. That's where an administrator can administrate things. Okay? We're going to make a page that is going to be a sort of a fakey user administration page. Okay? We want to be able to make a page where the administrator of a website could go in and look at all of the users that are on the website. Okay, so this is not a page for users. This would be a page for like the owner of a website or something like that. Okay, where they want to see all of the users. So let's start again. Let's make a PHP tag, and then let's make an HTML:5, and let's say user admin. And let's, instead of include into this file, let's do something called require once. Require once is exactly like include, except that it requires it, and it's not allowed to require it more than once. It's only allowed to require once. Now you might think to yourself, that sounds weird, but sometimes with PHP files, what you can end up with is a script over here that requires a file, and a script over here that requires a file, and both of those being included to the same script. And when this one requires a file, and then this other one requires the exact same file, but they do things that like aren't supposed to be done twice, it can be weird. Require once basically says, look, if this file has already been included, well, fuck it, I don't need to do anything. But I do need it, okay? So I need to require it, so I don't want to run if it's not there. I want to fail real hard if it's not there, okay? But at the same time, I don't want to include it again if it's already been included. So, if you want to go look up some stuff, there's include once. There's require, and there's require once. Okay? So there's a bunch of these things where you can get really specific depending on the structure of your files on how you want to include different files into your project. So right now, instead of saying include, we're going to say require once. It's the exact same thing as include, except this script will fail hard if there's not this file. And also, it won't try to include the file more than once. If it's already been included into the file, it won't include it again. Okay? So at that point, we're going to include our lib php helpers.php. And then, we're going to go make a new helper function. And it's going to be called getJSON. So we're going to make a new function called get_JSON. This function does not exist. We're going to make it up. We're going to take in a string of a file name. We are then going to return JSON decode file get contents of that S. So we're making our own function. Basically, we want to have a short function rather than all of that other stuff we had to do on that other page. We just want one function, get JSON. We're making up the name getJSON because we're making a new function. Our new function does other functionality in one step rather than 2 or 3 steps. So we're going to say, we're going to come back to our user admin, and we're going to say data equals getJSON of our data JSON nodes.json. That's it. You guys, I think I might use this on a lot of different pages. I might. It's possible. So it's nice sometimes to make a new function to make other functionality simpler. Or more easy to write. Or more easy to understand. I'm just going to go ahead and print p my data, just to make sure that it works. Save. I'm going to go to my useradmin.php, and it should be print ping my page, or my data. Cool. It works. Excellent. Always test things, you guys. Always test things. Test things periodically, just to make sure they're there, just to make sure they're working correctly, just to make sure you aren't completely wrong. I'm going to include my head. Into this page. I'm going to make another header. You might be thinking to yourself, why didn't we include the header? Well, because this header is a little different, and I don't want to bother making another part. Cool. Here we go. We now have a system in place where we can make navigation like that. We should be able to make navigation really quick. There is a system in place for it. Even if you didn't use it on your design, which you probably should have, I don't know. Even if you didn't use this system in your design, we definitely made one. Okay, it's there. And if it's not in yours, maybe you should include it in yours. Okay. I'm going to open the PHP block, and I am going to for each through my data users as user. For each is a PHP thing. There's also something like it in JavaScript that you might have seen. For each is a way of looping through all of the items in an array. And what's going to happen here is that it's going to refer to each item in the loop as user. So user will be the current item being looped through. There's no concept in our database of user. I want you all to recognize that. Okay? In our database, we have a users list. There's nothing called user in our database. Okay? So user is something here in our code that we're naming right now. As we loop through the users, we will call each one user. Okay? In that case, what we can then do is we can echo out a string with, for instance, div. And inside of that, there might be another div. And this might have a user name. This we will not have to set a brace around because it's a simple enough selection. Our other one was much more complex, and so we had to brace around it in order for it to work. But this is relatively simple, and so it just works. In terms of interpolation, earlier we had to use a brace around our more complex value selector. But this one is simple enough that it should just work. And then around this loop, I'm going to make a div that goes around it. So I'm going to save, I'm going to refresh. Now I have my list of people. As we loop through that data. In case you're not picking up, we're basically doing the exact same thing for the third time, right? We're doing it in a slightly new way. We're building upon the stuff that we learned before. We saw a for loop with simple notes. Then we saw a more complex, then we saw another for loop but with more complex data. now we're seeing something called a for each, which simplifies our data that was more complex before into something a little bit simpler. Okay? But it's still just a loop, still looping through data, still showing it with a template string that echoes out all of our data into it. Okay? We're going to take a break right now for 15 minutes. For 10 minutes? For 10 minutes. For 15 minutes? For 15 minutes. For an amount of time. We're going to take a break for 15 minutes. When we come back, more PHP. Hi, everybody. So, what are we doing here? We're trying to make a list of things, right? So it's possible that we need to make some more help here. I want you guys to remember that within this looped concept, we can't just write HTML. So we can just make classes, right? All the classes that we've... Uh-oh. Did you see that for a second? Now, right here, nothing really looks wrong. But look what happened when I did that. You guys, we're inside of a double quoted string right now, which means that when we're making classes here, it might be a good idea to use single quotes as our attribute string marks. Okay? So here, with our classes, instead of using double quotes, since we're already inside of double quotes, let's use single quotes inside of here to make all of our stuff. Now, we could do double quotes, but then we'd have to escape them to make them work. And that doesn't seem like as good of an idea. It seems a lot easier to just use single quotes here, and that'll solve that. So here we could say like a user list item, or something like that, right? We do whatever we needed to do to make our data look like however we want it to look. Okay? So for instance, this could be a class equals user list name, and this could be a class equals user list type. We save, upload. Nothing has changed, but now we should have lots of classes for us to be able to use to design this element with. It is so important when you're designing to just give yourself a huge chunk of classes way before you ever need them. Give yourself parents of things. Give yourself appropriate, like children and parents and all kinds of stuff. We'll go up here and we'll give this one a user list class. So now we have a user list with a user list item, with user list name, user list type. We're just overclassed, okay? We got so many classes now that no matter what we want to design, we have a class prepped for it, ready to go. And it's all namespaced to the section that we're designing right now, or the concept that we're designing. Notice we're not saying user list page or anything like that. It's just a user list. This user list could be somewhere else, on some other page too, and it could look the exact same way. So for instance, we could say perhaps right here that when we're designing this, the user list item has perhaps a margin top of 1em and a margin bottom of 1em, and then we could say that the user list type has like a font size of like 0.8 ems and like a font weight of bold. So we made it smaller, but we made it bolder. And a margin left of like 1em, but we'll make it 1 rem, so it's a little bit bigger. And now we have a list. Hooray! Now we have a list that seems more like a list as opposed to just text, right? Adding a little bit of design is something that you can fairly easily do. It's not a hard thing to do. We might even want to make this one have a color of something like color gray. Color gray? highlight, color grade dark. I also have a color neutral on my theme. Let me do color grade dark. Just to remind yourself that you do have these colors that hopefully you made for yourself. There we go. Have any of you seen? Have I told anybody to go watch the videos Refactoring UI? I mentioned that on YouTube. There's a video series called Refactoring UI. This guy's awesome. A lot of my current design sensibility, such as it is starting to come from this guy as I learn more and more. If you guys are interested in learning design that's really specifically web-centered, I know that a lot of times you guys take design classes and they're design, just like generally design goodness. If you want to take some web-centric design concepts, this is a good video series to look through. There's not that many videos, and he talks about old designs and how he changes them to be more modern and up-to-date. Talks about things like how you can weight colors and how you can use color blocks instead of lines. Lots of good stuff in there. If you're interested in a series of videos that might improve your design specifically, especially web design, good set of videos. So, there we go. Got a little design, got a little something on there. So there we go. Where do we put this code? Well, you guys, this code right here should probably be inside of our theme if we were going to put it anywhere. Right now I know that we're including CSS, so I'm just going to make a new theme. This is something really specific to this page. It doesn't have anything to do with the common or anything like that. It's super specific to this page right here. I know it's not super specific to the rest of our site, but maybe that could change over time. Maybe our site needs a user list page or something like that, right? So this is something where this wouldn't go in common. And it wouldn't go in some other file necessarily. I think we can put this in the theme of our site right now if we were going to design anything on this. I would just section it off into its own section of the theme.css. Now, what do we need to do now? Well, now, I want to make this a full administration page, but in order for this to be a more or less full administration page, what I need to do is I need to make this into something that has the ability to show more than one bit of content. Now, what we're going to do right now is something that could be done 100 different ways. When we get into the idea of programming websites, what you do, there is no right way to do it. We just learned a bunch of different ways to do for loops. There's lots of ways to loop through data, okay? There's no right way, there's just lots of ways. There's ways you can do it, okay? And whatever way you can think of or whatever way seems right at the time is right. We're gonna make a single document, a multi-page application right now, except it's going to be PHP based. If you take the 617 advanced like front end class, that one is going to do a single page JavaScript front end, a single document JavaScript front end application. Right now we're going to make a single document application, so it's going to have one document, but it's actually going to have multiple pages. This is a way of doing something like this. You could also break this up into separate pages if you wanted to as well, but we're just going to do one page. Okay, or one document with multiple pages. I want to make it clear, we're going to do a thing right now. It's not necessarily the way to do this thing, it's a way to do this thing. Okay? So, remember when we had those well, what array did we access when we put variables up into the URL? Does anybody remember the name of that array? Or that other, what did we call that? It was $_get. I want you all to remember that right now. The variables that get passed through the URL are called the get variables. If you don't remember that, write it down as a note. Variables passed through the URL are get variables. Okay? I I want to make a thing right here where I'm going to say that my user list username and my user list user type are actually wrapped up in a flex child. And that my user list item is a flex parent. And that over to the side there is a div class equals flex none. And then inside of this there is a brackets and then an anchor. And I want this to say visit. And I want this to be question mark ID equals 0 for right now. I'm going to save. I'm going to refresh. Now, over to the side, I have visit links. Because I used my flex parent around my user list item, I made a flex child that has my two texts inside of it, and then over to the right, I flex nunned my visit. So my flex child pushed the flex none over. You guys, we gave ourselves a couple of tools for layout and design. You really do need to learn those tools, okay? Learning how to use Flexbox for layout is so super important because it's so much easier once you learn how to do it. Just saying I want this over there is as easy as making a Flexbox and moving it over, okay? Now, so I got my user list, I got my visit link. When I click this visit link, notice that now the page stays the same, but the URL has changed to be question mark ID equals 0. It has been added on to the end of the URL. So let's go back into our loop right now, into our for each loop. And there's a thing you can do to the for each loop to get the index of the element that's being seen. So right now, we're naming the current object as user, but we want to also get its index in the array as we loop through. And we can do that by saying I equals arrow user right here. And if you want to learn more about this, I suggest you go to PHP for each how to use. Just search for it and find out more, okay? Search out more about the PHP for each, but what it can do is it can also get the index of the current element as well as name it something. So user is still the name of the current user, but I is its index in the array. So I will be 0, 1, 2, 3. Now at that point, I want to say ID is going to equal the I that we just got. So in this href, we're going to say that the ID equals the I variable. Refresh. Now, when we visit here, you can see that now we can visit each link. We can also click the list and add a hashtag. That's super weird. Let's go back up to our header, and let's say that the list actually goes back to user_admin.php, the default file, okay? So clicking the list button on the top will remove, hopefully, any content in the get. But then clicking a link will go to a page, clicking list goes back to nothing. Okay? So our list page just simply links to the file, but all of our other items link to a version of this file with a get variable called ID. Now, by the way, we're making up that variable. It doesn't exist. It's not a real thing. We're making it up. It's called ID. It makes sense. It's a good name. Okay, so now, back to our for each loop. What we're going to do is some logical programming. You guys, logic programming is hard. It is not an easy thing. Programming logic is doing if and else statements, okay? And it is the difference between doing math and solving problems, okay? Anyone can say 5 plus 5 is 10. But it's harder to think in your mind that if C equals 10 and B equals 5, what is A? That's harder. That's logical programming, and it requires more complex math, and it requires an if and all this kind of other stuff, okay? It's tough. So you're actually going to have to practice this if you ever actually think that you're going to get good at it. I can't teach you logic. I can teach you certain logical things, but at a certain point you need to think to yourself, in order to learn this, I have to make something of my own. That's hopefully going to be your portfolio site. You're hopefully going to take this after this semester and start on your portfolio before it's an assignment. Okay? Because you can start working on it right away, but in order to learn this stuff, you will have to make something other than you do in class. So, I'm going to come up to before where this user list is, and I'm going to make a PHP block. And then I'm going to come down to beneath where my user list div ends, and I'm going to make another PHP block. Okay? So I've made a PHP block before my user list, and I've made another PHP block at the end of my user list. You are going to have to keep clear in your head where the opening and closing of elements are. That's why we use tabs, so that we can see where our text starts and ends. Okay? If all your shit is over on the left right now, you fucked yourself. Okay? You're going to have a real hard time telling where stuff starts and ends, because we've got div, 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 div. And that's real hard. Okay? So, now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say if something else, and I'm going to open up my else brace, and then I'm going to go all the way down and close it out here after the user list, just like this. In fact, sometimes you can even write it just like this. Depends on how much you want to help yourself get things done. But I'm going to put it right here. Okay? So I've got a PHP block that closes this else that I started up here before my user list, and then it closes after the user list. Notice in Sublime Text, you guys, that if you click on certain symbols, they will highlight the closing or opening symbol of that symbol. So you can see I've got a red line on each of these. You guys probably have some sort of highlight on the opening and closing symbols of certain elements on your page. When I click here, it shows me the opening and closing thing. And when I click here, it shows me an opening. And when I scroll all the way down, it shows me that this is the one that closes, even though there's other ones in the way. Okay? So, I'm going to say if is set $_get ID. If there is an ID in the get, I want to do one thing. Otherwise, I want to show the list. So what I'm going to say is I want to echo the ID. Otherwise, I want to show the user list. I'm going to save. I'm going to refresh. But if I click on a user, I show that user's ID. If I click on list, I go back to the list because there's no longer an ID in the get. Click on another user, I see another ID, the one that's in the URL. Now this we've done before. This we did last week with our product list, right? Our little product list, we showed that we could click to another page and show the ID on the page. Okay? So we've technically already done this. So here's what we're going to do now. Okay? we are going to do something that technically does not improve our application at all, but it is something that I want you guys to learn how to do. Okay? We're about to do something right now that does not technically improve our application. It is just something I want you to learn how to do. We're going to make a function that shows a user. Okay? This isn't, it could be done easier, it could be done faster, it could be done better, but I want to do it this way because it'll teach you guys to make functions. Okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to make a function called showUser. And that user needs to get past a one user object into it. Now remember, there is no such thing as a user object. There's only the user's array and objects inside of that. Okay? So what we need to do is we need to use the getID to select a user. So we're going to pass in a data users using the getID to select the user. The getID should be the index of one of the users. So we're going to use it to select a user object and then pass that into our showUser function. The showUser function has not been created yet. It doesn't exist. Your script will break if you try to do this right now. Okay? Notice that we are now using very complex selectors to get our data. We're saying there is a get array, and I want to select the ID property of that, and then we're going to use that to select the user's index, which the user's is a property of data. Okay? It's very complex data that we're dealing with, even though our JSON file seemed so simple. It was super simple. But data can get complex very quickly. Okay? So, when we scroll, right now, if you save and you refresh, this breaks. That doesn't work. Okay? The list page probably still works, but click into a user and it breaks. That's what we expected. Because we don't have this showUser function. So, at the top of our document, inside of that PHP script, let's make a function, and let's call it showUser. Okay? So we've been making functions right now. We made a printp function, we made a getJSON function. We've been making functions, so let's make a new function. This function is called showUser, and it's going to expect one user object passed into it. Okay? This function expects one user object passed into it. And at that point, we are going to echo something called a hereDoc. H-E-R-E-D-O-C. H-E-R-E-D-O-C. hereDoc. If you go look up PHP hereDoc, you'll find out all about PHP strings and how to use something called a hereDoc. It's fascinating. There are a lot of rules involved with it. But one of the interesting things about a hereDoc, and especially Sublime Text, is that if we echo any old string right here, and then we go down to a new line, basically what this is allowing us to do is make a string. You say any old phrase right here, and you do 3 left carets. And then you use that exact same phrase down here and a semicolon, and it basically creates a string in between those spots. But in Sublime Text, if we make this string right here HTML, then the code inside of here actually highlights like HTML. But the cool thing about it is that now we can interpolate variables right in the middle of that string. So we can say a user name. A hereDoc allows us to do a number of things. One, when we've been doing strings so far, they don't highlight the HTML. That kind of sucks. With a hereDoc, we can highlight the HTML of our strings. That's cool. The other thing is that a hereDoc can just simply interpolate variables inside of it. It doesn't need anything else to do it, so we get string interpolation, we get variable interpolation, and we get string highlighting. It is the best of all worlds when we use a PHP here doc to show our text. Okay? So now, if I save and I refresh, I should see the name of my user. I can see that you're impressed. Oh boy, this class is dead. I'm going to keep going though. So, let's keep going. Let's make a user. Oh, one other thing is we're not inside of quotes anymore. So the here doc allows us to just use normal quotes however we wanted to because we're not inside of a quoted string anymore. Lots of advantages to using the here doc. Now, we're going to make a user. Okay? So then we're going to make an h2. And that's going to have a class of username. And I'm going to say that that is username. Now. And then we're going to make a div of user type. And then we're going to make a, let's say that there's a strong, and that is, it says type. And then we'll make a span, and that is the user type. And actually, I'll call this user property. That's what I think I'll do. And then I'll just do the other user properties. So for instance, I'm going to do a email, and that's email. And then I'm going to do classes, and that's classes. I'm going to save, and I'm going to refresh, and this is probably going to fail. Well, it didn't fail, but classes array doesn't seem like it worked right. Actually, that worked pretty good, except that classes array doesn't seem that it worked right. Okay? So this brings up an interesting point. Here docs can't concatenate within themselves, which means that we can't do calculations inside of a here doc. All of your calculations have to be done before a here doc. All a here doc can do is interpolate variables. That's it. Okay? So, what we're going to do right now is we're going to learn a new concept. And before we echo inside of this function, we are going to make a variable called classes. And it is going to equal something called an implode. An implode is a way of taking an array and joining it into a single string. Okay? Explode is a way of taking a string and breaking it apart into an array. Remember earlier when I did that split in JavaScript? In JavaScript there's a split and join, and in PHP there is an implode and explode. Okay? Implode is going to take an array. It's going to take a string. In this case, I'm going to say a comma space. And then it's going to take an array. So we're going to say a user classes is going to be combined together with a comma and then a space. And then we're going to have a variable called classes, and we're going to simply show that. It's not user classes anymore. It's just classes. Now, if I save and I refresh, you can see all of my classes separated by a comma space. And I can do that with now all of my people can be seen. Now let me ask you something. Is this a good website? website? No? Why not?
Just data,
So?
no design.
So? It's got design? How dare you? There are lots of design. I have put a lot of work into the design of this. I put like 9 weeks of work into the design of this. Anyone else? Is this a good website? You're allowed to have an opinion right now.
Yes.
Does anyone have problems with this website? Other than the design, how dare you? Is there navigation?
The content.
Well, the content is something that's in a working state. Is it a good website? There is a difference between the best website and a good website. Let's talk about what a good website is. Does this have design? Yes, is the answer. How dare any of you? Yes, this has design. Is this white and black with the blue and purple links? No, it's not. It has design. This fucker's responsive. Okay? This thing has design. So, does it have navigation?
Yes.
Yes, it does. Does it have all the navigation that could be wanted here? Could it have more? Could this website have more navigation? Honest answer. What's more navigation that this website could have?
Back.
I like that answer. And here's why. Because it's not core navigation, but it is still navigation. And it's something to remember when you're making websites, is that this website could still have more navigation, even though I think that its core navigation is done. I don't think we can make core navigation to anything else because there's no other core page, right? There's simply the list and the users, and there's nothing else. So at the moment, there's no more core navigation to this. And so the only other thing is that this particular page could probably use a backlink, okay? So in that case, then, we could still go into this and, for instance, at the top here, add a div that has an anchor that goes back to the user admin.php, and it simply says back. It is important, you guys, that way before you start thinking about whether this website looks good, that you think about whether it is good. And a good website has good labeling. We got heading 1, heading 2. A good website has good navigation, clear navigation, a way to move around your application. And a good website has good design, but that is third on the list. It needs clear labeling and clear navigation way before it needs good design. And if anyone tells you different, they don't use websites. Because if you use websites, the way it looks is something that is important on certain websites. But most websites, the first thing you think of is, no, I don't want to sign up for this. No, I don't care about notifications. How do I find something? Where do I go? What am I looking at? What is this? What is this thing I'm looking at? Not because it looks bad, but because it doesn't have labels. Okay? Labeling and navigation are so more important than design. And this does have good design. You should see what this class looked like 3 years ago. Questions? Do you guys know what a form is? F-O-R-M. Do you know this word? Form? What's a form? Not a trick question. Someone yell out a form. That is a database. What? A job form? Sure. Like signing up for a job. That has a form. What's another kind of form? So let me ask that question again. Let me step back a second. Raise your hand if you know what a form is. Okay, let me ask you a different question. Raise your hand if you think you should know what a form is. Everybody raise your hand. Everybody raise your hand right now. When I give you your assignment this week, what you're going to be tempted to do is to look up PHP form how to do. And you're going to get a lot of bullshit that is not going to be helpful to you, okay? And what I want you to look up instead is HTML form, because you need to look up forms and form tags and how to design forms. You guys, forms are shit like this. That's a form, okay? A form is something that you take in user input. Generally speaking, almost everything that takes in user input, that's a form, okay? If a user has to type, that's definitely a form. If the user has to click something, that's usually a form. Logins are forms. Signups are forms. Entering your credit card information, that's a form. All of you should have had a form somewhere on your site, at least on the checkout page, right? Checkout page should have had a form. If you didn't know what that was, that's a form. If any of you had a sign-up page, that's a form. If any of you had a sign-in page, that's a form, okay? You guys have all probably already done some forms, hopefully. So your assignment today is going to be to do another form. Now, see how this form already has data inside of it? That is a pre-filled form. You have 3 assignments this week. Technically, you have 1 assignment and 2 extra credits. And the second extra credit is impossible. You cannot do it. So, let me describe to you your homework this week. Number 1, I need you to take this example that we have right here, and I need you to take this page that we have right here and turn it into an administrative form for editing this user. It should not be a page that shows the user's information. It should instead be a form for editing that user's information. So, right here, there should be an input that has teacher, but it could be edited. Right here, there should be an input that has my email, but it can be edited. Right here, there should be the classes that has the classes, but it should be able to be edited. Okay? You are to make this into a form. Now, forms have proper HTML semantic structure, and I need you to all make a good, proper, correct form. I need you to make an actual form element. There needs to be an actual submit button. This form needs to look like it could actually edit this user's information. By the way, right now this page has the name in an H2, but in your new version there should be a way to edit the name of this user because the name is part of the data of this user. Okay? So right now I have given you an example of showing this user's information, and I need you to take my example code and I need you to change this into a form, a good, nice, proper form. And if you don't know how to make a good, nice, proper form, do not look up PHP form. Instead, look up HTML form and good, nice, proper HTML form, how to do. Okay? There needs to be labels. There needs to be inputs. There needs to be a submit button. You need to be able to submit this form. However, that is where assignment number 1 ends. This form does not have to work. It just needs to look like it could work. Or I should say, with a little bit more work, it would work. But right now it doesn't have to work. It just needs to have all the right parts of a form, but it doesn't do anything. Okay? So your assignment this week is to take our example and turn it into a form. Now, by the way, this form should look good. Potentially, it should use the exact same form that you might have already designed. Or if your forms were currently shit, maybe it needs to get improved. Okay? I say that with love. This should be a form that looks good. It should look like a good form. Okay, whatever that means to you, that's what it needs to be. So it needs to have design, it's not nothing. Okay, I think you need to improve the list page. I don't know what that means, but I think it could use some improving too. Okay, I think you need to improve this administration page, this administration document, and turn it into a page where an administrator can see all the users in this database, click into one of them, and see a form for editing that user. And that is where assignment number 1 ends. Okay, you need to do at least that much. It needs to look good. It's a good looking form. It's a proper semantic HTML form. Assignment number 2, make that form work. When somebody clicks the submit button, it should edit the user's information in the JSON notes.json. I'm going to give you a hint right now. Are you ready for your hint? There are 3 things that are worth knowing. Earlier, we learned about a thing called file get contents and a thing called JSON decode. And then just a minute ago, we learned about a thing called implode. There is also a file put contents. There is also a JSON encode. And there is also an explode. And that's your hint for assignment number 2, extra credit number 1. I need all of you to attempt assignment number 2, extra credit number 1. Okay? All of you need to get your form done, and then you need to attempt to make that form work. But once again, you cannot go and look up PHP form how-to, because you're going to get somebody else trying to teach you something that you have not learned today. However, today you have learned tools that will allow you to solve this puzzle. You need to solve this puzzle, not the general puzzle of how to submit this form. You need to solve this puzzle, okay? How can we submit this form? I don't want you to make a new... I don't want you to just follow some tutorial. I want you to actually try to solve this, okay? There's a way of solving this. It is there. There is, however, going to be some logic that's pretty standard. You're going to have to find a way to figure out where the data of your form is. So I'll give you one more hint. And it's that there is a post. Correct. Okay? We've used the get. There's also a post. Now, that is assignment number 2. It's fairly simple. When you submit the form, it actually edits the JSON notes.json, and it edits the data of that user. And when the page is refreshed, the information of that user is changed. And when you go back to the list, the information of that user is still changed. Okay? Assignment number 3, extra credit number 2. I want you to do all of what is called CRUD. CRUD is a database concept that stands for create, read, update, and delete. These are the 4 concepts that happen with a database. It's the only things you can really do. I mean, everything else is just administrative, but create, read, update, delete are the concepts of a database. And what I want you to do is I want you to make a user administration page in which somebody can add a new user, edit any user, or update a user. So they can create a user, they can update a user, and they can delete a user. Notice that read is just what we're doing all the time. Read is what we're always doing, okay? Now, it's worth mentioning, when you look up CRUD, you might find a lot of information about how to do this on a database. We're not using a database. We're using a JSON file, okay? And I want to say one very important thing that I mentioned earlier, but that is still important to say. This 3rd assignment is impossible. You do not have, from this class, the ability to do this. The only reason you'll be able to do this is because you already had some programming knowledge. There is no good reason any of you can solve this in a week, which means that all of you should try, because failure is certain. And I'm telling you right now, you will not learn programming unless you try this assignment. You will not learn programming at all, and you might as well just quit this class if you don't at least try. Okay? Now, having said that, assignment number 3 is impossible. We already know that. Assignment number 2 is possible. That's why you should try assignment number 2 first. Don't skip ahead to assignment number 3. All right? First of all, do assignment number 1. Get the form working. Get the form looking good. Okay? Just do that. Do that real quick. Make the form. Okay? Next week I'm going to do it in 15 minutes. You're going to be so mad at me. Then attempt assignment number 2. Make the form work. And all the form does is edit the current user. I've given you a number of hints. This is an assignment, all right? This isn't a do this. This is a figure it out. This is a programming assignment. Figure it out, okay? Only when you get assignment number 2 working should you attempt assignment number 3. But all of you should be definitely trying your hardest at assignment number 2, because you should all be able to do it, but it is hard. It's a programming assignment. And assignment number 3 is impossible. So just try it if you get that far. Okay? Does anyone want to ask me a question right now about this assignment? Or about anything that we learned today about programming PHP and about looping through data, about making data, and about showing data?
I'm lost the assignment 3. You said the D is delete. What do we need to delete?
A user.
Ah?
A user.
A user?
Yeah. So you need to be able to create a user, update a user's data, and delete a user.
Yeah.
Any other questions? So, there's about 15 minutes left in class. We're done here. You may leave if you want, or you can start in on your work. It is probably a good idea to confer with each other and make sure that you understand what I meant by form, because it's amazing how many of you, even now, still don't know what I mean by make a form. Okay? For one more example, just let me show you something. Okay, you guys? So on my site, I have made myself my own journal editor for my blog. Okay? Does this look familiar? It's a list of things, right? And then at the top, it's got a link that says Add New. And over here, it's got a D for delete, and it's got a V for view, and it's got a click for link. Now, this just means that when I made this, I wanted something very, very simple. But I made this for myself for editing my journal. And I made this after years of doing it by just editing the JSON file. If I click Add New, I get to a form that lets me add a new journal with a title and content and images and other kind of stuff, right? But if I click into one of these, then it allows me to see all of the content of this page and allows me to edit the content of this blog post. So this is a more complex form, but this is the idea, right? You're supposed to make a editor for users, right? An administrative editor of users. Mine has nothing to do with your assignment except as an example of the concept, right? There's a list of things. You click one, you're able to edit it. If you get far enough, by the way, don't do this right away, only once you get far enough. You can add new to add a new blog post. You can delete to delete a journal entry. I also have pagination because I have lots of elements in here and I don't want to have to see them all at once. If any of you guys think about it for your final project, adding pagination as a concept, even if it doesn't actually work, is a good idea for design. What it means to paginate through, it's called pagination, P-A-G-I-N-A-T-I-O-N, pagination. Yeah, this is just one more example of the concept I'm talking about, okay? There's a list of things, you click into one of them, you're able to edit it, or you're able to add a new one, or you're able to delete them, okay?
So first part of the assignment, the form, is it supposed to be a blank form or a form with the data?
It should, that is a good question. The first assignment, assignment number 1, is to make a form for this user. So that means it should already be filled out. The form should already be filled out with data, which means that this form should have clear labeling, because otherwise a filled out form is not clear. Okay? Yes, so it's a filled out form.
Then you can edit it
And then you can edit the data.
and delete it.
So you'll have to learn how to make an input and also how to add the value of an input. Huh? Can I, like, is it wrong? Is it bad? What about it? Oh, you want me to upload the last hint?
The thing that you upload in your website, you're going to delete it at the end of the semester.
Yep.
So how we can save this? Have it as a
You have
library?
access to all my code. You can save it all.
How?
Copy and paste it into a file. This is, well, in the most simplistic way, this is selecting a value, this is assigning a value. No, in the most simplistic way, the fat arrow is used for assignment and the dash arrow is used for selecting data. So this is selecting the user's property of data. What this is doing is something that's very similar to when we made an array in the last week, where we're essentially saying the index is I and the value is user. But it's just the way that PHP writes that.
首先我知道这个是我们要做一些那个表格，然后不管 work 不 work， 那个就像那个名字啊那些可以输入 input 的时候，对不对？然后就是 make 这个表格 work。